Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone today to our LISA PodiumX series discussion powered by LISA and supported by Stanford Rebuild. The lead incubator and startup accelerator, or LISA, was founded by Stanford GSB lead participants for the lead community, and it is an ecosystem for innovators, startup founders, and it is the first hybrid platform for incubating ideas to MVP and then scaling those ventures globally. The PodiumX series is our curated engagement platform designed within LISA, focused on founders, venture capital, industry, thought leadership, emerging tech and design, and product ecosystem. My name is Deepti Pava. I'm the founding partner at LISA, and I'm based in Switzerland. Let me introduce the rest of our partners as well. Here today we have Hira Dangol, who will be facilitating our conversation today. He's based in the Bay Area. We also have on the call today Edward Munt, who is also based in the US on the East Coast. We have two other partners, Joe Anthony, who's based out of Sydney, Australia, and Misha Baikov, also based out of Silicon Valley. I would like to thank all of you, today's speakers, Stanford GSB lead, Rebuild team members for supporting today's event. So today's panel discussion is focused on customer validation and innovation and what the industry needs, and how to find some early adopters and users to test your products. Businesses are based on ideas and assumptions, but the difference between a good and a bad business, it is in the ability to validate those assumptions. And our panelists today will shed light on critical steps to validate your startup's business ideas. It's a pleasure to welcome Jose Maria Ciota, Executive Director for Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center at IESE Business School in Spain, Pradeep Kimere, Vice President, Product Engineering, Western Digital, Raj Thingra, Global Strategic Startups, Amazon Web Services, and Thiago Teodoro, Director, Product Strategy, Venafi. And with that, let me hand it over to Hira to start our wonderful discussion today. Hira.
All right, thank you, Deepti. Really appreciate to all of our participants coming out from all over the world. This is our fourth PodiumX series that we've been running past couple of weeks as a part of this Stanford Rebuild program and the Stanford GSB lead LISA cohort participants, the cohort program as well. Today's our panel discussion is focused on the customer validation, which is a critical step within the idea to the incubation phase, where you've been going through a lot of this program discussion and activities to ideating to the MVP. And also we'll be focusing around the innovation aspect of that. And potentially we'll try to connect that those kind of the dots to our the specific needs from the industry. So that's where I think most of our customers lies in. And thank you all of our wonderful panelists. We have pretty outstanding lineup today, all across the different business verticals, and coming from diverse background and ecosystem of those industries. I'm super thankful for having this another 30 to 40 minutes. We'll get started with intro and then a little bit deep dive into the actual nuances of this panel discussion today. And then we'll take some of the questions out towards the end of the discussion, where you can participate with your curiosity out of the discussion, or you have, if you may have like some specific challenges or the question that you might be going through this rebuild program processes, and then you can have those questions being clarified or answered by our today's amazing panelists. So with that, I think as you all know, this discussion, we wanted to get started with a little bit of the intro piece, which is kind of Deepti already went through. We talked about all kinds of the this discussion we wanted to focus. Before getting started into the actual deep dive of today's panel discussion, I would like to go to each of our today's panelists to give a quick intro by themselves and also the overview of their current work so we can directly hear from our individual panelists. Let me get started with our panelists. Raj, do you want to get started first, and then we'll go, other panelists right after that?
Yeah, sure. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Raj Dingrat. Very happy to be here at this global event since we have people really dialed in from across almost every continent. So first and foremost, I am a Stanford GSB alum. So I graduated from business school some time ago. Just as a sort of introduction about myself, since business school, I have held 2 general management roles in public companies. They were basically managing about sort of $500 million or $1 billion businesses. I've also worked at 6 different startups. They were all venture-backed startups. 3 of the startups were acquired. The last 2 startups, I was the CEO. My last startup was acquired by VMware. And in a very, very unusual way, I went from working at startups to joining Amazon Web Services. So I've been at Amazon since July last year, so about a year. And for me, I always thought Amazon was a very, very innovative company, and this role really allowed me to work with a variety of very interesting startups, that could be based anywhere. So just as a sort of a quick background about AWS and my role. So Amazon Web Services, I think you probably all know about it. Our vision of the startup team, and there's actually hundreds of people that work in the startup team at Amazon that basically partner with startups on a global basis. So our vision at Amazon startup team is to accelerate the success of every startup on earth. And we offer basically help to startups to get the most out of AWS, and that could be credits, could be training. In fact, there are quite a few programs already set up for Stanford. And then we also help you as a startup accelerate your business, and that could be related to go-to-market resources, business mentorship, and so on and so forth. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself. I'll pass it back to Hira.
Thank you, Raj. I would like to go next, Joe.
Yes. So first of all, thank you, Hira, for the invitation, and it's really an honor to have all these great panelists and audience today. If I have to synthesize myself on what I'm currently doing, besides enjoying life, I would say I have 2 hats. The first hat is I'm the executive director of the Entrepreneurship Innovation Center at ESE. There, I'm leading the activities with 3 audiences: entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors globally. We are also doing several collaborations with different universities, such as Stanford with the Search Funds Conferences, one model of entrepreneurship by acquisition, and more. The other hat, the second hat, is I'm an expert, designated expert on corporate venturing. We will talk later what's corporate venturing at the European Commission, at the World Economic Forum, Mobile World Capital, and a few other institutions. Usually my work, or especially recently in the past 7 years, I have been working with around 500 chief innovation officers worldwide in the States, in Latin America, Asia, Europe, and many more, to try to understand how this phenomenon of corporations working with entrepreneurs can better work together. You maybe have read my publications in Harvard Business Review, MIT Technology Review, Forbes, and more. Looking forward to learn from all of you, and thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Next one here with me, Pradeep.
Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's great to be here. I want to thank Lisa for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with the rest of the panelists we have today. It reminds me of a story when you asked me about my introduction and what I do. A few years ago, I was in this flight from San Francisco to Tel Aviv, and there was a passenger next to me, and she was scrolling her grandkids' pictures on her phone, and she was sharing some of her experience with them, right? And she asked me, like, what do you do for a living? And, and what I did at that time is, I looked at her phone and say, hey, the pictures you have in your phone, you make sure that they're safe for you, that you can access them all the time, they're safe for you to access them. So the reason I want to bring that up is, right now the data is becoming an engine of the global economy, right? And if you look at some of the statistic on data, I think you will hear this term. In 2018, it was at probably 32 zettabyte. Now in 2023, it'll be around 123 zettabyte, and 90% of that data will be generated by machine, right? So we really understand the importance of that data, and starting from the phone, the photos, all the way to maybe the code you are writing today in your laptop, and all the way to data center, right? So, I wanted to introduce Western Digital here. Maybe some of you may not know about that company. Western Digital is actually a part of this whole thing, from phones, computer, all the way to data center. So we are in the mission to solve these problems for what the world is going through right now. So just to give a little bit intro on me, I actually went to school in a small town in Montana. Maybe some of you may know. I do have, after that, I actually started my career in Boise, Idaho, and I moved to Bay Area in 2011, and I joined SanDisk, and now it's part of Western Digital. So what I do in the company is, I have a team, a global team, who helps bring up the product development, as well as, to ensure that the, development support, the quality and manufacturing is done. So by the time they go to the end customers, we have the right cost structure, right quality to this product. So anyway, we'll be sharing more about that. Great to be here. Look forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep. Last one I have, Tiago.
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. When Hira invited me and told me about the topic of the discussion, I said, hey, that's perfect, good timing. We are going through that right now in our startup. I'm Brazilian. I've been in the US for the past 12 years now, so it's been a while. I started my career in software engineering, and then I became a management consultant, strategy consultant, and then a product manager. I've been in the security space for the past 7-8 years, and I work for Venafi. It's a mid-size startup, at least in my view, about 300 people. And what we do in the security space it's very, very interesting. The way we like to talk about is there are two actors on a network, people and machines. People use logins and passwords, right, to authenticate, to communicate. But machines also have identities, and machines also have to use those identities to access resources. We spend about $10 billion a year protecting people's identities, right? Users' identities, but we are just starting to protect machine identities. And that's where we are focused, and we are trying to create this category. And we'll talk more about it in a little bit. But how do we educate the market? How do we talk about this new thing, this new innovation? So I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation here.
All right, thank you everyone. So I think that was a real great introduction for yourself and what you do currently. I'm super excited for this diverse panel to have today to focus on our specific topics around our customer validations, innovation, and the things we need to prep for the industry need. Before we get started into the real discussion, I wanted to start it with like some kind of the myths, right, around saying that most startups failed because of the lack of the customer, but not from the actual failure of the product development. So I wanted to get started this with the Raj, right? Do you see any kind of or do you follow any kind of the defined process of managing product development and the customer development kind of the work? And what's your perception on this?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There is sort of maybe two ways to think about this, right? One is quite often I find in startups and in companies, people think from inside out, meaning, hey, I have this great idea, I want to build this technology, and then we'll figure out who to sell it to. And then the other approach is sort of outside in, certainly, bringing customer centricity is a very important part of the journey for a startup. And one of the things that I've learned, I've always sort of brought customer centricity to my work and my roles in the past. But one of the things I've learned, certainly even more so at Amazon, is about customer obsession. So it's one of our leadership principles and the #1 leadership principle, and customer obsession. So I think that, as he was asking, is there a failure from a customer development perspective? And rather than maybe focus on the negative, I'm going to basically say there are 5 questions that an Amazonian will ask as they start to think about building a product. And I'm actually going to hold it up. I have my prop. So I'm going to read it out and then I'll reinforce it. So these are actually really, really simple questions. And I think for anybody that's building a startup, it's really, really important to actually not just ask them, but write them down, right? So #1, who is your customer? #2, what is the customer problem you're solving? #3, what is the most important customer benefit that you plan to deliver? #4, how do you know what customers want? And #5, what does the customer experience look like? I've met with quite a few founders over the last 2 decades, and sometimes they struggle to answer these questions. So my, advice to you would be, as you think about your startup, really, it's very important to write these questions and answer them. And then second part, and we don't have much time to go into this, but another process we use at Amazon is also called the Amazon PR FAQ. So if someone wants to, take a picture of this, I'll just repeat them in a minute. You can Google Amazon PR FAQ. And what that's basically involves, if I were to just say it in 15 seconds, is you have to write your press release today about what you plan to deliver to customers, right? So it's a press release and it's an FAQ. And then you basically address the questions external stakeholders might have and internal stakeholders might have, including your salespeople. So I would say use these 2, what are the 5 questions, and answer them, and then think about a PR FAQ process. And I think that will really be very helpful to you from managing your customer development perspective.
Thank you, Raj. I think that's a wonderful insight for sure. How customer focus and target customer identification is the key part, and also the pain points that you need to identify. So for the sake of audiences, the video will be also available after the event. So you'll have this information available to you as well if you missed out taking notes or some data points here. Yeah, I just wanted to get this question directly to Pradeep as well, since you do a lot of stuff, so development work within the your enterprise space too. So do you want to add some additional insights here?
Yeah, I think a great point from Raj, right? So the only other thing I may add is, especially based on the industry experience I have, maybe you can also connect to that, is sometimes, when you are not in a commercial or consumer space directly, you have to think about the end customer, which is what's your customer is going to deliver that end solution, right? What are those areas you need to focus on? So when you do that, and especially from a hardware point of view, we have to really need to have an interconnected view about what we're developing internally and what our customer is looking for, as well as what's the end goal of that solution, right? So once you have the holistic view of what you are doing at the end solution, that really helps you first to understand what is needed, second to plan for predictability, right? And also that helps you pivot, because if that changes to the end solution, you can pivot accordingly. So that's one thing I could add.
Great, thank you. Let me get this to Joe. I think with your amazing background across the, a lot of innovation, things like what you do today, right? So I have a specific question to you in terms of like how the established companies try to make try to work together with the startups. And is that true that 75% of those collaboration between the startups or established firms like corporation end in the failure. Is that something you wanted to give some more details around that, and what's your thoughts on that, Joe?
Sure. I would like for a second to zoom out of the panel to see what happened so far. So I like, for instance, what you mentioned at the beginning, Hira, on this failure of the startups. Around 7 out of 8 startups fail after 5 years. So the failure rate is quite high. For sure, is another topic to define what's failure, what's success. But then what's one of the stoppers, triggers of that failure? We have focused so far the discussion on the entrepreneurial perspective. But what happened with the corporate perspective? So I like the question that you have shoot right now. Many entrepreneurs, and as you can see in our recent piece at HBR, since 2013, the number of collaborations between established corporations and innovative startups has dramatically increased since 2013, has increased by 4. However, I support totally your point, around 3/4 of those collaborations fail. The question behind that we were, and that's why we were talking with those 500 chief innovation officers, is what's happening? Why those collaborations between corporations and startups fail? And for that, I would like to share with you 2 best practices that we learned, or 2 takeaways. One is, I don't know how many of you have a pair of shoes of Adidas. You can raise your hand in the right side of the chat. Any of you? Only 1, 2, 3, Adidas shoes, no one? Okay, no one. Oh, okay, thank you, Ximena. 3 more, Brian, okay. But for sure, all of you knows, oh, thank you, a few more. All of you knows what Adidas does, no? Adidas, a few years ago, I think it was 3 to 4 years ago, they had a challenge, an internal challenge. They were trying to tailor each shoe for each customer, but they didn't have internal capability, resources, or speed to do that. What they did, they said, hey, come on, there are thousands of entrepreneurs around the world. Let's look where that talent is and let's collaborate. So they found, for instance, one chemistry professor, not IT engineer, not, I don't know, business person, a chemistry professor, PhD, that was also co-founder of companies called, maybe you know, Carbon. They do 3D printing. What they did a joint collaboration, a joint prototype, a proof of concept, where they develop a new product called Futurecraft 4D. I'm not receiving commissions for talking about this case, I have to say. And what they do, so they have been able to tailor each shoe for each customer. So the takeaway here is corporations working with entrepreneurs can speed up processes, reduce cost of innovation, de-risk innovation, and more. But now the perspective also from the entrepreneurs, there you can have a hidden opportunity, a big ally. On the one hand, corporations have resources, distribution channels, but they like things that you have as an entrepreneur, that amazing creativity that you have, that speed, that aversion to risk that they have, you don't have that. So the interesting part of this type of collaborations is that the weaknesses of some are the strengths of the other. So my recommendation here would be think twice on with who you can work in the industry, with which corporations, because maybe you can find their resources, expertise, and more to move forward your startup.
Great, and thank you, Joe, again. All right, and also to audience, we also have follow-up panel discussion around this in next week to more deep dive into corporate ventures and things, how a startup directly work with the corporation as well. And this is definitely insightful discussion, Joe, you brought up to my curiosity on that side. So I wanted to bring all of our panelists and the audience to some kind of into the company building process, right? So there is in pursuit of what you focus on the customer validation. So there is a customer discovery process, you have customer validations, and then customer, what do you call that, creation process that equates to the actual building of the company, right? So in that kind of the flow, I think maybe I'll get this to Tiago, since you focus on more on the product and strategy part of your work. And in terms of the new markets or even existing market or niche market, how do you see this kind of the things happen in the company building process? I think this might be a very interesting discussion we can bring up to our first time founders who are joining us today as well. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love it that Raj's 5 questions from AWS. We could spend the whole panel just talking about it as well. And I think they are also very relevant for this discussion on company building. So starting by, I think, defining what an existing market is versus a new market, right? So my definition would be it's a market that other players are already trying to solve that problem, right? So you might not solve using the same way, but basically you are targeting a persona or a customer with this and tackling the same problem that other people are already doing. Versus new markets, it's a lot more unknowns, and you could call it innovation. But on existing markets, there's a lot of more information that you can find, right? You can look at internally at your company and find who the subject matter experts are, who the SMEs are, and start there. And then you look outside and okay, what customers or your potential customers are saying and interviewing them. There are analysts that you can just read about them. I think that's something that startups in general should do more, right? Actually, it's just like Google stuff, right? In engineering, there's this joke that 80% of the code is reused. It comes from Stack Overflow and some other places. On the strategy, on the product side, there's a lot of information out there already that you can quickly get as well. So existing market, more information there. However, there's a big however here, and I'll give you a personal example. So we are a 10-year-old company. We are somewhat, in my mind, very successful. We focus on Fortune 500. So we have these large accounts, 4 of the top 5 banks, 5 of the top 5 health insurers, and so on. We are launching a new product on the cloud that will have most of the, there's actually solving the same problems as our on-prem solution. But the way we are going to market and the way we are building this is different. We're not talking about building it better or building it with the same features. We are leveraging these 10 years of experience, but we are starting with an open mind. We are going back, talking to customers and talking to prospects with open mind and, okay, what's MVP look like? What's the minimum set of features that you actually need to solve your problem? And as we go and start building this, we also have to think how fast we want to take this to market, right? Two approaches. As we target Fortune 500 with very enterprise level and secure level requirements, we could stay with our heads down, talking to people and building this product for 2 years and then release it. And that's definitely not what we want to do. So we said, let's target these smaller customers, which is very different from what we do today. Because smaller customers have less enterprise requirements. They have more or less non-functional requirements. So we can get an MVP first ready, take it to market, have users actually in the product, testing it, using it, giving us feedback, not only on the product side, but on the go-to-market side, right? What's the messaging? What's the right go-to-market model that is not, it's less, we spend less time, it's a lower cost. So even when you talk about existing markets, there is innovation, there's a new way, different ways to go about that, about building the product, about building the company, building the go-to-market engine. So I'll stop here. Otherwise, we could keep going.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again, right? So let me get started maybe on Pradeep's side. I think in terms of like, as we go through this journey, when you involve in the net new product development, right? Right out in your company itself. So is where do you start with the, pinpoints and then maybe like making sure that it meets some sort of like the quality, reliability, and scale. So can you add some insights on that too?
Sure, absolutely. I think so just to contrast, right, what I'm seeing on the audience is maybe some of the software centric. So I want to give you a little bit of different view on hardware, right? If I tell you today that some of the products we develop may be multi-years project, right, just to bring the hardware, that should not surprise you. The reason is, we manufacture, both flash and HDD in Western Digital, right? And I'm on the flash side of the business. In order to bring these products in time, it takes a long time. So the way I'm will give you my perspective on this is, we have to kind of synthesize the macro of the world, right? Once you do that, then you need to stage your internal platform, right? It starts from hardware to make sure that can meet those needs for our customers. So what happens is, think about it, right? When you're developing a hardware and you invested so much R&D money on that, and after 2 years, things completely change, right? So you may be wasting your R&D effort and the cost to that. So it's extremely important to see the end solution and how you are staging your platform that it actually meets the customer needs, right? So we have to do this methodically. So we have a very precise, product development plan internally once we understand the customers and the solution, right? So we stage the hardware. Then once the requirements are gathered, we have an internal process. We develop each of those processes. We build MVPs for those. Then, as you know, the market start to shift. The applications are different, right? So our end customers will ask us to change few things. So we also have a good change management process, which is very critical, right? So if you develop a hardware and it cannot support the change management that come in as a new requirement, it's difficult to deliver a new product, right? So that's the third aspect. The fourth aspect is, how do you truly test your product? So in a hardware business, we need to ship these units in millions, for example, right? So that a lot of units we have to ship. So just because you build a product in the lab, you cannot ship. You have to ship from factories, which means everything has to be designed for scale. So which is extremely critical, right? So we need to put this thought process in mind, that what is reliability, what is quality, what is customer experience. So we need to really understand that from design point of view. So we build those margins in design, right? So after that, we actually test in manufacturing to ensure that, this has margin, this can go to certain life cycle of the product. We have that margin built into the product. So all that gets tested, right? That's more of a manufacturing flow. So before we get to manufacturing, we also do product level testing to make sure that the quality and reliability is met per standards. That's our number one goal, to make sure our products meet those quality and reliability, right? So what happens is, within this process, when we manufacture these, so when we go to, before we manufacture, actually, we go to customer for integration. So customer may see different issues. So we really care that we really make sure that our customers don't see an issue with the integration, right? So you have to really look into, how do you develop the product? How do you validate it when you're developing that product through your internal metrics, right? And then when you go to customer, you don't see any issues during the integration and the qualification, right? And once you get approval from this, from the customer qualification, then you start ramping your products in volume, right? Then you need to think about, how do I scale this product? How do I manufacture these products in scale, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a device in a phone. You may have like a 999,000 device that could be working perfectly fine, right? If you have few devices that don't work, that's a problem for us, right? So we kind of look at this term called DPPM, which is a defect part per million, right? And you can Google that. So we need to ensure that every unit we ship to our customer, it could be end customers or our OEM customers, is actually meets that quality and reliability, right? So there's a lot of process that goes through. That's why it takes a long time to validate. So that's the kind of perspective on internal product development from our side.
Awesome, thank you. So I want to focus next topic around like time to market. I think this might be more relevant as well now as we discuss about, you know, customer validation and all of this, just kind of the journey too. So maybe Raj, I think you have a phenomenal experience of running multiple ventures, you know, as a successful serial entrepreneur. I think I want to focus around the time to market. Do you have experience of any kind of like minimizing the time to market where when it comes to like validating customers or even initial MVP, the build process, right? As you see the target customer, whether you focus on consumer tech versus enterprise, it's real different the way I see how this, you know, the validation and all this can, and how as a founder, how they can minimize this kind of the time to market so they can have like, you know, a lot of win-win situation as they go through the, you know, product development or even, you know, getting more customers out there as a first paying.
Yeah, and I think it's a definitely a good question. So I think that how you execute on your product certainly varies based on software versus hardware. You heard, you know, an incredibly good set of insights from Pradeep, because hardware just has a very, very different product development cycle compared to software. So that's one vector, hardware versus software. The second is B2B versus B2C. And I know there's some questions coming up in the chat panel as well. So while on the whole, how you approach customer development is very similar for B2B versus B2C, right? You know, I mean, at Amazon, we have, you know, lots of different businesses. Some of them are B2B, like Amazon Web Services. And then certainly there's Amazon.com and Echo and so on and so forth that are more B2C oriented. They follow the same innovation process, customer development process. Now, when it comes to time to market, I think that, you know, therefore for hardware, the way you optimize time to market, you know, is going to be quite different. And perhaps Pradeep can shed some more light on how he may have accelerated that. I'll focus a little bit more on the software side. And on the software side, I think that, you know, there are quite a few philosophies and methodologies that people use. You know, there's sort of the lean startup approach where you're almost actively involving people in building, you know, feature by feature. There is the MVP approach that says, what's the minimum features you want to basically have before you start to reach out to customers? I think a consumer is going to be more tolerant of, you know, less features. If you start to look at B2B, and let's call them enterprise customers or commercial customers, they will require a certain set of minimum features before they invest the time and resources it's going to take for them to trial your product, right? So for B2B, time to market means you need to have a certain product. You go through your sort of, you know, approaches of what's my alpha or beta product? How many customers will I have in my beta? What are my objectives for the beta process? What am I trying to establish? Am I trying to establish quality, or am I actually trying to validate customer pain points and the features I'm building to solve those pain points? And you can start early betas. You can start, you know, betas maybe when you're more comfortable with it. So to some extent, you know, what you do in your beta will really determine, you know, the type of customer and vertical you're trying to go after. So financial services, healthcare tend to be very risk averse. So they're going to be somewhat more cautious about, you know, making sure you've gone through maybe a little bit more rigorous process. There may be other sort of verticals, maybe gaming, where you can actually get going a little faster, right? So I think that, you know, in terms of, just to summarize, time to market is really about making sure you have the right, I'll call them checkpoints or exit criteria for the various stages of your product development cycle as you define it, and make sure that you're meeting them. Ultimately, of course, if you're able to get a certain number of customers to buy your product, then you're ready to at least, you know, start that process. You know, before you may decide, before you go mainstream or scale up, you know, what are some of the criteria that are important to you? Maybe customer support becomes important because if your product requires a lot of heavy touch and heavy support, it's going to be hard to scale unless you really have a lot of people on your customer support side. So I think those are some of the things I would suggest you should think about.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Raj, again. To our audience, we might be getting prepped into the Q&A session in next couple of questions. So you're free to start submitting your question to our Q&A chat window, and I'll be taking those questions to our panelists here. So now I think I want to come back to Joe. I think around the European value of death or innovation. We talked. It was very interesting conversation. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that in terms of like research, commercialization aspect of all the academic institutions follow, and then finding the right market to validate those kind of the discoveries. Can you add some kind of the little bit insights there, so we know that a lot of the discoveries that happen through academic institution, and there is a real value of the commercialization aspect, and in terms of like European value of that and innovation. This is something I was also very curious about your thoughts on that.
First of all, maybe we would say, what's the European value of death? Let's explain. Also keep in mind that this is a phenomenon that is not only happening in Europe, but in many other markets, in the States, in Asia, and many more. On the one hand, we have a strong research ecosystem. Just to mention, for instance, Europe, but as I mentioned, this is happening in many other regions. Around 21% of top research centers worldwide are there. Max Planck, Fraunhofer, Oxford Innovation, and many more. However, if you go to the European Patent Office, there are around 3 million patents. However, 95% of those are dormant, inactive, underused. And the remaining 5% generates 40% of the GDP of Europe, 40%. Do you imagine for a second to activate just an additional 5%? This has been kind of the elephant in the room for many, many years. And academics, the industry, startups, entrepreneurs, investors have tried to find an answer. On February, we published just an additional step. We are a lot of steps to do yet, but we did a first step or an additional step. There we tried to find what were the main trigger or stopper for that, the so-called European value of death, of commercializing discoveries coming from these institutions to the market. And one of those was the lack of funding for proof of concept. Now, imagine that you are an investor and you have two entrepreneurs. In the left hand, you have one entrepreneur's marketplace, you understand the business, and he or she tells you, in 7 years, I will give you returns. And then on the other hand, you have a PhD with a complicated product or technology or discovery. You don't quite understand what's happening there. And she tells you, or he tells you, I'm going to give you returns in 15 years. So what's the first shot is going to give you higher chances? So what is happening currently in Europe is at the beginning, those researchers have research funds. At the end, they have venture capital funds, but in the middle, nothing, the so-called value of death. Now, what can governments, corporations, universities can do to tackle that? And we propose several mechanisms. One is to co-create new co-investment public-private funds for proof of concept, covering that gap. Second, tailor public mechanisms. We found, for instance, we have in Europe one mechanism is called the SME instrument, a small and medium enterprise instrument for financing those startups, those deep tech and deep science entrepreneurs. But there was so many bureaucracy. So you almost died before getting that funding. So how can we tailor those financial public mechanisms to those entrepreneurs? That would be second. And then there is one huge opportunity. If you connect my previous answer, this race of corporate venturing, corporations working with startups, plus this lack of funding, what's happening? Imagine for a second that we connect those dots. So now one of the things that we propose is how corporations with those huge resources can collaborate with those deep detective science entrepreneurs that maybe are lacking those. And we are starting to see so many examples. Just I give you one. BP, energy sector, they allow me to talk about this. Example has not been published yet, but they are offering right now between 50K and 250K during 12 months for proof of concept, where you have to ensure that you validate the concept. And after that, they offer you, the entrepreneur offer a discount in the next investment round. So in short, it's a way to cover that lack of funding for deep detective science entrepreneurs while getting a lot of innovation for corporations.
Awesome, great, thank you, Joe. So I think we're getting ready for our real questions that's coming from our audience. Great questions popping up while I'm prepping here behind the scene. I want to focus real quick. This is more like a rapid fire kind of the questions. Just answer with me like 1 or 2 lines so we can cover this, all panelists in this discussion. As we talk into the topic of the real disruption or aha moment of the disruption. So in your opinion, as a panelist, right, so representing a diverse industry background, where do you see the real disruption is happening? So specific to your industry or the market you focus, maybe Tiago, do you want to get started on there?
Yeah. So in the security space and in IT in general, right? And talking about B2B mostly, but B2C as well, because of the whole COVID situation around the world, we had 2 years of digital transformation happening in 2 months, right? The speed of projects in internal IT that people had to run and execute on was amazing in the last few months, as people started working from home from literally one day to the other, right? Hey, next week everybody's work from home. So lots of changes there. Not only from a security standpoint, that's where I most look at, but from a productivity standpoint, right? Look at us doing a Zoom call here. We could have done a physical and Zoom. So yeah, digital transformation, that's still key, and we've been talking about that for the past maybe 5 years, 10 years, but nobody was expecting what happened this year and so fast.
All right, thank you. Pradeep, do you want to add what's your opinion on that in terms of the real disruption?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think the data, to me, what I'm seeing is a massive amount of data, right? And today, we're in a Zoom call today. The way we're connected is quite unique. Maybe it's accelerated, right? So I think data is the external factor for disruption. But let me talk maybe quickly on an internal disruption we're looking into as well, right? So I don't know how many of you know Flash products. That's a long discussion to go through. But if you look at the Flash, we used to call planar Flash, and you can kind of compare into maybe the single family home in Central Park versus the 3D NAND, which is more of a skyscraper within New York City, right? So we have a lot of disruption to support that data movement that's coming in as a macro theme, right? So anyway, that we're looking into all the external disruption as well as how internally we can innovate and help support that the problem the world is seeing.
Wonderful. So maybe I want to get back to Raj as well. I'm very interested to hear your perception on this too.
Yeah, so I think the current pandemic environment is really disrupting everybody, right? It started months ago, and you can see different industries, different verticals are, fundamentally having to deal with it in a very, very different way. So I think Tiago had a very good point, and also reinforced by Pradeep. Digital transformation is being accelerated, right? Even for companies that were not digitally transformed, they need to transform because the way they get to their customers, the way they get to their supply chain is completely different from where it was in 2019. So I think there is a whole lot of disruption going on. In terms of certain industries or verticals that I see, some interesting things going on, I would say that there are sort of a couple of industries from my vantage point I do sort of look at and work with different startups. I think startups that are doing automation are seeing definitely a positive uptick in the kind of things they can basically deliver. So a few startups that I'll mention, for example, one startup I'm familiar with, they build autonomous mobile robots for manufacturing and other types of use cases. They're called Fetch Robotics. They're based here in San Jose, California. And then they're seeing an uptick. There are other companies that are sort of involved in what's called robotic process automation. This basically automates business processes where manual sort of steps are essentially automated using software bots. There are two companies in this category called UiPath and Automation Anywhere. And then they're both doing very well in this particular sort of automation category. So I think broadly speaking, people that are helping deliver automation are seeing positive outcomes right now. The next industry I'll quickly talk about is healthcare life sciences. And even there, I think there are companies doing very innovative things and disruptive innovations or disruptive innovations. So one company I just became familiar with recently is called Butterfly Network. And what they're bringing is ultrasound to really be very affordable. And in fact, the hardware device, the bill costs a few $1,000s, and you can plug it into your smartphone and actually be able to do ultrasound, right? So that's a very good example of disruptive innovation where you're delivering more than 10x the benefit. Your typical ultrasound machine probably cost, I don't know, several $100,000, and now you can actually do it with $2,000. Just sort of take that as a magnitude, right? So those are examples where I think healthcare life sciences also seeing a lot of disruptive innovation happen in this particular time frame.
Great, thank you, Raj, again. So Joe, do you want to have any final thoughts around this topic, in terms of like aha moment and the specifics of real disruption that could potentially happening, and you may have seen from different angle perspective as an innovation expert here?
I want to rephrase. Is there a way to increase the aha moments? One pattern that we have found is that maybe, or sometimes when entrepreneurs are looking for those aha moments and working with corporations, or sorry to focus on the corporate perspective because that supports or enhances the entrepreneurial perspective. One pattern that we have found is that many entrepreneurs, deep tech, deep science entrepreneurs, or other type of entrepreneurs are focusing on the common, let's say, doors of corporations, the common corporate incubators, corporate accelerators, corporate venture capital. However, the reality is much richer. The sophistication of those mechanisms has increased dramatically in the past years. And now we have mechanisms such as, I don't know whether you have heard about the venture client model, or hackathons that for sure have heard about, and many more. Venture builders, excavators. Now connecting this aha moment with your previous question on how to speed up the time to market, how to increase the speed, we have found with data that there are mechanisms, doors to corporations that are faster than others on average. For instance, let's compare. If you have, imagine that you go to a corporation and you want to prototype or to test or to validate your idea, and you have two corporations. In the left hand, you have one corporation that offers you to validate your idea with a corporate incubator. And then on the other hand, you have a venture client, which is the corporation is going to be your first client, perfect for validation. We found that you can, on average, go between 4 to 7 times faster with the venture client. And from the corporate perspective, in many times you can save around 4 to 5 times the innovation cost internally of the corporation. So my suggestion would be to increase the aha moments, but also to increase your time to market. choose strategically how to validate ideas with corporations, choosing the right door.
Thank you, Joe. So I want to get back to the final Q&A session here, I think, and thank you again, all the panelists, for moderating some of the questions directly coming to Q&A chat. I do see here it's been answered. So I'm going to specific some of the questions here I was being provided to my team. So one question I see here is based on any suggestions or tips on how to effectively and cheaply get task users to test your early MVPs or prototype for consumer business. So maybe Gerard or Tiago, you can address these questions.
Yeah, more than happy to. So and then I think that's my general advice as well. It's being scrappy and step outside your comfort zone and go find the users where they hang out, right? If it's a physical location, if it's a B2C product, go and hang out at the restaurant door or whatever and talk to people. If it's a B2B company, find who the users actually are. Is it a specific team inside security or a specific team inside marketing, right? It's not marketing, can be 1,000 people organization, who the users inside marketing are, and what are the websites that they look at, what are the blogs that they look at, or there's if it's a marketing, Reddit/marketing, right? Go there and talk to people, understand their needs, have things that you can test, and try to have these conversations also in a way that you can capture and quantify them, right? I had 100 conversations, 50 told me X, 20 told me Y, and so on. So go where they are and quantify it, ask and quantify.
Great. Raz, do you want to add our advice, any kind of suggestion out here in this question?
No, I think in the interest of time, I'll sort of pass. Tiago gave a very good response.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I have one more question. This is to you, Joe. The question is, where can I find examples of that combined funding? Would love to find corporations with impact investing strategies and co-founding programs.
For that, I may suggest, and for that I introduce a new concept that is we have released around 2 weeks ago. It's called Corporate Venturing Squads. Squads. What does it mean? Since many corporations are working with entrepreneurs, corporations are starting to team up in not big groups, not more than 10, let's say between 5 to 6 corporations, either in the same sector, in different spaces or slots of the value chain, or in different sectors. From the perspective side, and I will provide a few examples, it's interesting because you can scale your validation, not only in your B2B, but also in your B2C validation of ideas. Why? Because you are tapping into maybe 5 different sectors of the 5 different companies, in maybe not 20 as one corporation, but maybe 100 joining the 5 corporations. So I would say, try to find the corporate venturing squads that are starting to emerge globally. I provide one example, Start for Big. Those are 5 companies in 5 different sectors. So Telefonica in the phone sector, Caixa in the bank sector, and then one in the automobile industry and energy. They are working together to validate, to prototype, to work with entrepreneurs. Imagine that with just one collaboration, you can validate with distribution channels and with 5 different sectors. That is scaling your validation process. Now, if you want to see more examples about that, just connect with me or check my name on Google, and there you will find our 3 or 4 recent studies. There we explain examples such as Start for Big, or the one that we have launched 2 months ago is called Restarting Together, where we are 14 large corporations, global corporations, working to support entrepreneurs.
Thank you. Joe, on that. I think for the sake of the time, we're almost nearing to our end of our discussion. Phenomenal questions popping up, continue to popping up here as well. And I would recommend all the participants to also directly connect with our panelists. We got amazing panelists here today, and you can continue to have that post-dialogue going on. I wanted to end with final questions. It's a generic question to all of our panelists to, as a engaging discussion, we continue to have this to wrap up today's discussion. What specific one advice you want to give to our Stanford Rebuild program participants and GSB lead visa cohort participants who are actively working now towards their first MVP, right? So just your final quick thoughts and advice to our participants. I'll get started with Pradeep here.
Sure, maybe two. I would say deliver on time and provide consistent experience. And I believe it's a very compounding in a long-term game, right? So I would say two.
Thank you. Raj?
3 words: be customer obsessed.
Wonderful. Tiago?
Shortly, people buy from people. So be a person and you talk to another person on the other side. Keep that in mind.
Thank you. Finally, Joe?
Understand the corporate perspective to spot the hiring opportunities you have.
Great. Thank you again, all of the panelists today. I'm super fascinated the way we conducted our discussion today and all the incredible engagement we got with the outstanding thoughts, insights to our participants here. I would like to thank each one of you participants here for attending our PodiumX series globally, right? And also thankful to all the participants and panelists and Stanford Rebuild program and the Stanford GSB lead team for continuation of your strong support on getting this series up and running. We have a phenomenal two PodiumX series coming up next 2 weeks, focused on the corporate ventures, and then also VC only panel discussion towards the end of the program to give you more perspective from the investment side. So with that, I would like to thank you again, all of you, for your incredible time with us today. Have a wonderful rest of your time, folks out there globally. Thank you.